Before discussing the human rights in Islam, let's go over a few points about two major approaches to the question of human rights, the Western and Islamic. This will enable us to study the issue in its proper perspective and help us avoid any confusion which generally befogs to such a discussion. The Western approach. The West has the habit of attributing every good thing to themselves and try to prove that it is because of them that the world got this blessing. Otherwise, the world was steeped in ignorance and completely unaware of all these benefits. So let us look at the question of human rights. It is very loudly and vociferously claimed that the world got the concept of basic human rights from the Magna Carta of Britain, though the Magna Carta itself came into existence 600 years after the advent of Islam. The truth of the matter is that until the 17th century, no one even knew that the Magna Carta contained the principles of trial by jury, habeas corpus, and the control of Parliament on the right of taxation. If the people who had drafted the Magna Carta were living today, they would have been greatly surprised if they were told that their document also contained all these ideals and principles. They had no such intention, nor were they conscious of all these concepts which are now being attributed to them. As far as my knowledge goes, the Westerners had no concept of human rights and civic rights before the 17th century. Even after the 17th century, the philosophers and the thinkers on jurisprudence, though they presented these ideas, the practical proof and demonstration of these concepts can only be found at the end of the 18th century in the proclamations and constitutions of USA and France. After this, there appeared a reference to the basic human rights in the constitutions of different countries. But more often, the rights which were given on paper were not actually given to the people in real life. In the middle of the 20th century, the United Nations, which can now be more aptly and truly described as the divided nations, made a universal declaration of human rights and passed a resolution against genocide and framed regulations to check it. But as you all know, there is not a single resolution or regulation of the United Nations which can be enforced. They are just an expression of a pious hope. They have no sanctions behind them, no force, physical or moral, to enforce them. Despite all the high-sounding, ambitious resolutions of the United Nations, human rights had been and are being violated and trampled upon at various places, and the United Nations has been a helpless spectator and/or hypocritical. The UN is not in a position to exercise any effective check on human rights violations. That is so even when a heinous crime of genocide is perpetrated with no regard to any proclamation of the United Nations. Genocides have taken place and are taking place, but the United Nations does not have any power to take any steps to stop the genocide and do justice for all. No action is even taken against the country guilty of this most heinous crime. So let us look into basic human rights according to Islam. The first thing we find in Islam for every man or woman in this connection is that Islam lays down some rights for everyone as a human being. In other words, everyone, whether he belongs to this country or that, whether he is a believer or unbeliever, whether he lives in a forest or a desert, whatever be the case, he has some basic human rights simply because he is a human being, which should be recognized by every Muslim. In fact, it will be his duty to fulfill the following obligations. 1. The right to life. The first and the foremost basic right is the right to live and respect human life. The Holy Quran lays down, whoever kills a human being without any reason like manslaughter or corruption on earth, it is as though he had killed all mankind, 532. As far as the question of taking life in retaliation for murder, or the question of punishment for spreading corruption on this earth is concerned, it can be decided only by a proper and competent court of law. If there is any war with any nation or country, it can be decided only by a properly established government. In any case, no human being has any right by himself to take human life in retaliation or for causing mischief on this earth. Therefore, it is incumbent on every human being that under no circumstances should he be guilty of taking a human life. If anyone has murdered a human being, it is as if he has slain the entire human race. These instructions have been repeated in the Holy Quran in another place, saying, "Do not kill a soul which Allah has made sacred except through the due process of law." 151. Here also homicide has been distinguished from destruction of life carried out in pursuit of justice. Only a proper and competent court will be able to decide whether or not an individual has forfeited his right to life by disregarding the right to life and peace of other human beings. The right to life has been given to man only by Islam. You will observe that the people who talk about human rights, if they have ever mentioned them in their constitutions or declarations, then it is clearly implied in them that these rights are applicable only to their citizens, or they have been framed for the white race alone. This can clearly be gleaned by the fact that human beings were hunted down like animals in Australia, and the land was cleared of the Aborigines for the white man. Similarly, the Aboriginal population of America was systematically destroyed, and the Red Indians, who somehow survived this genocide, were confined to specified areas called reservations. They also penetrated into Africa and hunted down human beings like wild animals. All these instances go to prove that they have no respect for human life as such. And if they have, it is only on the basis of their nationality, color, or race. Contrary to this, Islam recognizes this right for all human beings. If a man belongs to a primitive or savage tribe, even then Islam regards him as a human being. To the right to the safety of life. Immediately after the verse of the Holy Quran, which has been mentioned in connection with the right to life, God has said, "And whoever saves a life, it is as though he had saved the lives of all mankind," 532. There can be several forms of saving man from death. A man may be ill or wounded, irrespective of his nationality, race, or color. If you know that he is in need of your help, then it is your duty that you should arrange for his treatment for disease or wound. If he is dying of starvation, then it's your duty to feed him so that he can ward off death. If he is drowning or his life is at stake, then it is your duty to save him. You will be surprised to hear that the Talmud, the religious book of the Jews, contains a verse of similar nature, but records it in altogether different form. It says, "Whoever destroyed a life of the Israelite, in the eyes of the Scripture, it is as if he destroyed the whole world. And whoever protected and saved one life of the Israelite, in the light of the Scripture, it is as if he saved the whole world." Talmud also contains the view that if a non-Israelite is drowning and you try to save him, then you are a sinner. Can it be given a name other than racialism? We regard it as our duty to save every human life because it is thus that we have been enjoined in the Holy Quran. On the other hand, if they regard it necessary to save the life of a human being at all, it should be the life of an Israelite. As far as other people are concerned, according to this view, they do not seem to be human enough to deserve protection of their persons. In their literature, the concept of goyim, for which the English word Gentile and the Arabic word ummi, illiterate, is used, is that they enjoy no human rights. Human rights are reserved only for the children of Israel. The Quran has mentioned this belief of the Israelites and quotes the Jews, saying, "There is no blame on us for anything we may do with regard to the unlettered folk," that is the Ummi, 3:75. 3. Respect for the chastity of women. The third important thing that we find in the Charter of Human Rights granted by Islam is that a woman's chastity has to be respected and protected under all circumstances, whether she belongs to our own nation or to the nation of an enemy, whether we find her in the wild forest or in a conquered city, whether she is our co-religionist or belongs to some other religion or has no religion at all. A Muslim cannot outrage her under any circumstances. Any promiscuous relationship has been forbidden to him, irrespective of the status or position of the woman, whether the woman is a willing or an unwilling partner to the act. The words of the Holy Quran in this respect are, "Do not approach the bounds of adultery," 1732. Heavy punishment has been prescribed for this crime, and the order has not been qualified by any conditions. Since the violation of chastity of a woman is forbidden in Islam, a Muslim who perpetrates this crime cannot escape punishment whether he receives it in this world or in the hereafter. This concept of sanctity of chastity and protection of women can be found nowhere else except in Islam. The armies of the Western powers need the daughters of their nation to satisfy their carnal appetites even in their own countries. And if they happen to occupy another country, the fate of its womenfolk can better be imagined than described. But the history of the Muslims, apart from a few lapses of the individuals here or there, has been free from this crime against womanhood. It has never happened that after the conquest of a foreign country, the Muslim army has gone about raping the women of the conquered people, or in their own country, the government has arranged to provide prostitutes for them. This is also a great blessing which the human race has received through Islam. 4. The right to a basic standard of life. Speaking about the economic rights, the Holy Quran enjoins upon its followers, and in their wealth there is acknowledged right for the needy and destitute. 51:19. The words of this injunction show that it is a categorical and unqualified order. Furthermore, this injunction was given in Makkah, where there was no Muslim society in existence, and where generally the Muslims had to come in contact with the population of the disbelievers. Therefore, the clear meaning of this verse is that anyone who asks for help and anyone who is suffering from deprivation has a right in the property and wealth of the Muslims, irrespective of the fact whether he belongs to this nation or to that nation, to this country or to that country, to this race or to that race. If you are in a position to help and a needy person asks you for help, or if you come to know that he is in need, then it is your duty to help him. God has established his right over you, which you have to honor as a Muslim. 5. Individual's right to freedom. Islam has clearly and categorically forbidden the primitive practice of capturing a free man to make him a slave or to sell him into slavery. On this point, the clear and unequivocal words of the Prophet are as follows. There are 3 categories of people against whom I shall myself be a plaintiff on the day of judgment. Of these 3, 1 is he who enslaves a free man, then sells him and eats this money. Al-Bukhari and Ibn Majah. The words of this tradition of the Prophet are also general. They have not been qualified or made applicable to a particular nation, race, country, or followers of a particular religion. The Europeans take great pride in claiming that they abolished slavery from the world, though they had the decency to do so only in the middle of the last century. Before this, these Western powers had been raiding Africa on a very large scale, capturing their free men, putting them in bondage, and transporting them to their new colonies. The treatment which they have meted out to these unfortunate people has been worse than the treatment given to animals. The books written by the Western people themselves bear testimony to this fact. The slave trade of Western nations. After the occupation of America and the West Indies for 350 years, traffic in slave trade continued. The African coasts where the black-skinned captured Africans were brought from the interior of Africa and put on the ships sailing out from those ports came to be known as the Slave Coast. During only 1 century, from 1680 to 1786, the total number of free people who were captured and enslaved only for British colonies amounts, according to the estimate of British authors, to 20 million human beings. Over the period of only 1 year, 1790, we are told that 75,000 human beings were captured and sent for slave labor in the colonies. The ships which were used for transporting the slaves were small and dirty. These unfortunate Africans were thrust into the holds of these ships like cattle right up to the top, and many of them were chained to the wooden shelves on which they could hardly move because these were only 18 inches apart, kept one on top of the other. They were not provided with suitable food, and if they fell ill or were injured, no attempt was made to provide them with medical treatment. The Western writers themselves state that at least 20% of the total number of people who were captured for slavery and forced labor perished during their transportation from the African coast to America. It has also been estimated that the total number of people who were captured for slavery by the various European nations during the heyday of the slave trade comes to at least 100 million. This is the record of the people who denounce Muslims day and night for recognizing the institution of slavery. It is as if a criminal is holding his finger of blame towards an innocent man. The problem of the slaves of Arabia was solved in a short period of 30 or 40 years. After this, the only form of slavery which was left in Islamic society was the prisoners of war who were captured on the battlefield. These prisoners of war were retained by the Muslim government until their government agreed to receive them back in exchange for Muslim soldiers captured by them, or arranged the payment of ransom on their behalf. If the soldiers they captured were not exchanged with Muslim prisoners of war, or their people did not pay their ransom money to purchase their liberty, Then the Muslim government used to distribute them among the soldiers of the army which had captured them. This was a more humane and proper way of disposing of them than retaining them like cattle in concentration camps and taking forced labor from them, and if their womenfolk were also captured, setting them aside for prostitution. In place of such a cruel and outrageous way of disposing of the prisoners of war, Islam preferred to spread them in the population and thus brought them in contact with individual human beings. Over and above, their guardians were ordered to treat them well. The result of this humane policy was that most of the men who were captured on foreign battlefields and brought to the Muslim countries as slaves embraced Islam, and their descendants produced great scholars, imams, jurists, commentators, statesmen, and generals of the army, so much so that later on they became the rulers of the Muslim world. The solution of this problem, which has been proposed in the present age, is that after the cessation of hostilities, the prisoners of war of the combatant countries should be exchanged. Whereas Muslims have been practicing it from the very beginning, and whenever the adversary accepted the exchange of prisoners of war from both sides, it was implemented without the least hesitation or delay. In modern warfare, we also find that if one government is completely routed, leaving her in no position of bargaining for the prisoners of war, and the winning party gets its prisoners easily, then experience has shown that the prisoners of war of the vanquished army are kept in conditions which are much worse than the conditions of slaves. Can anyone tell us what has been the fate of the thousands of prisoners of war captured by Russia from the defeated armies of Germany and Japan in the Second World War? No one has given their account so far. No one knows how many thousands of them are still alive and how many thousands of them have perished due to the hardship of the Russian concentration and labor camps. The forced labor which has been taken from them is much worse than the service one can exact from slaves. Even perhaps in the times of ancient pharaohs of Egypt, such harsh labor might not have been exacted from the slaves in building the pyramids of Egypt, as has been exacted from the prisoners of war in Russia in developing Siberia and other backward areas of Russia, or working in coal and other mines in below zero temperatures, ill-clad, ill-fed, and brutally treated by their supervisors. 6. The right to justice. This is a very important and valuable right which Islam has given to man as a human being. The Holy Quran has laid down, "Do not let your hatred of a people incite you to aggression." 5:2. And do not let ill will towards any folk incite you, so that you swerve from dealing justly. Be just, that is nearest to heedfulness. 5:8. Stressing this point, the Quran again says, "You who believe stand steadfast before God as witness for truth and fair play." 4:135. This makes the point clear that Muslims have to be just not only with ordinary human beings, but even with their enemies. In other words, the justice to which Islam invites its followers is not limited only to the citizens of their own country, or the people of their own tribe, nation, or race, or the Muslim community as a whole, but it is meant for all the human beings of the world. Muslims, therefore, cannot be unjust to anyone. Their permanent habit and character should be such that no man should ever fear injustice at their hands, and they should treat every human being everywhere with justice and fairness. 7. Equality of human beings. Islam not only recognizes absolute equality between men irrespective of any distinction of color, race, or nationality, but makes it an important and significant principle, a reality. The Almighty God has laid down in the Holy Quran, "O mankind, we have created you from a male and female." In other words, all human beings are brothers to one another. They all are the descendants from one father and one mother. And we set you up as nations and tribes so that you may be able to recognize each other. 49:13. This means that the division of human beings into nations, races, groups, and tribes is for the sake of distinction, so that people of one race or tribe may meet and be acquainted with the people belonging to another race or tribe and cooperate with one another. This division of the human race is neither meant for one nation to take pride in its superiority over others, nor is it meant for one nation to treat another with contempt or disgrace, or regard them as a mean and degraded race and usurp their rights. Indeed, the noblest among you before God are the most heedful of you. 49:13. In other words, the superiority of one man over another is only on the basis of God consciousness. purity of character and high morals, and not on the basis of color, race, language, or nationality. And even this superiority based on piety and pure conduct does not justify that such people should play lord or assume airs of superiority over other human beings. Assuming airs of superiority is in itself a reprehensible vice, which no God-fearing and pious man can ever dream of perpetrating. Nor does the righteous have more privileged rights over others, because this runs counter to human equality, which has been laid down in the beginning of this verse as a general principle. From the moral point of view, goodness and virtue is in all cases better than vice and evil. This has been exemplified by the Prophet in one of his sayings thus: "No Arab has any superiority over a non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab. Nor does a white man have any superiority over a black man, or the black man any superiority over the white man. You are all the children of Adam, and Adam was created from clay." Al-Bayhaqi and Al-Bazaz. In this manner, Islam established equality for the entire human race and struck at the very root of all distinctions based on color, race, language, or nationality. According to Islam, God has given man this right of equality as a birthright. Therefore, no man should be discriminated against on the ground of the color of his skin, his place of birth, the race or the nation in which he was born. Malcolm X, the famous leader of Africans in America, who had launched a bitter struggle against the white people of America in order to win civil rights for his black compatriots, when he went to perform the pilgrimage and saw how the Muslims of Asia, Africa, Europe, America, and those of different races, languages, and colors of skin were wearing one dress and were hurrying towards God's house, the Kaaba, and offering prayers, standing in one row, and there was no distinction of any kind between them. Then he realized that this was the solution to the problem of color and race, and not what he had been trying to seek or achieve in America so far. Today, a number of non-Muslim thinkers who are free from blind prejudice openly admit that no other religion or way of life has solved this problem with the same degree of success with which Islam has done so. 8. The right to cooperate and not to cooperate. Islam has prescribed a general principle of paramount importance and universal application, saying, "Cooperate with one another for virtue and heedfulness, and do not cooperate with one another for the purpose of vice and aggression." 5:2. This means that the man who undertakes a noble and righteous work, irrespective of the fact whether he is living at the North Pole or the South Pole, has the right to expect support and active cooperation from the Muslims. On the contrary, he who perpetrates deeds of vice and aggression, even if he is our closest relation or neighbor, does not have the right to win our support and help in the name of race, country, language, or nationality. Nor should he have the expectation that Muslims will cooperate with him or support him. Nor is it permissible for Muslims to cooperate with him. The wicked and vicious person may be our own brother, but he is not of us. And he can have no help or support from us as long as he does not repent and reform his ways. On the other hand, the man who is doing deeds of virtue and righteousness may have no kinship with Muslims, but Muslims will be his companions and supporters, or at least his well-wishers.